Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tape Crusaders. This is the podcast that reviews every single superhero TV show and movie ever made. This is your co-host, Mike L., and I'm joined by none of my other co-hosts this week, but that's okay because we have special 70s TV aficionado Kyle Van Dongen joining us. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us.
You're welcome, although that's the completely inaccurate description of me, I think.
That's probably true, but you are a fan of certain kinds of TV from certain eras, one of them being, what would you call it? Gaiju?
Well, I think specifically it's tokusatsu. I'm butchering that.
Okay.
That's basically just Japanese special effects productions like Ultraman or Kamen Rider or Super Sentai. Lots
Interesting.
of long-running Japanese hero shows.
So I got some trivia for you. Are you aware of the very first show ever to have a man inside a giant robot?
Yeah, it's Japanese Spider-Man, I believe.
That's right.
Which
correct. Isn't that amazing?
Made by the same company, Toei, I think, Studios, which also does Super Sentai. I think they were on season 3 or 4 of Super Sentai at that time. And then Spider-Man came along, had the giant robot, and they said, hey, that's a great idea. So Super Sentai start using giant robots, and people in America may recognize that as Power Rangers.
Yes, amazing, isn't it? You know, that's the thing is, like, I watched that that TV show on Netflix, The Toys That Made Us. I'm sure you saw that, right?
No, actually.
Wow, if you watch that show, you'll realize how everything is tied together. Everything. Like, American and Japanese pop culture, it's just like it's a double helix DNA feeding each other, right? Like, you know, from G.I. Joe to Transformers to Micronauts, like, it all ties together. It's Robotech, right? It's all really cool. So
well, yeah,
definitely,
I mean, that's been my experience, definitely. Like, I love video games too, right? And that's all the best stuff comes from Japan.
Right. Well, hey, as a huge Transformers fan, I can't argue with that. However, there are some good things that come out of America, and one of them we're going to talk about today, and that's the Incredible Hulk. Now, before we jump into this, we should remind our listeners that you are not a comic book reader. You've only read a small handful of comics, right?
Yeah, in fact, I would say specifically with the Incredible Hulk, before this, the only thing I know is like from the recent MCU movies, and not even his standalone film. That's one of the few I haven't seen. And then the rest just cultural osmosis, right? Okay.
So the Hulk actually has 2 solo films, right? The one by Ang Lee, and then the one by some nobody.
Yeah, the Edward Norton one. That's what I was referencing. I haven't seen either.
Okay. So, for the record, I'll just say that they're completely different from each other. I have mixed feelings about both. I also have mixed feelings about Mark Ruffalo and that whole thing. But the one thing I'll say definitively is that although there's many different versions of the Hulk in the comics, I personally have no interest in the way the Hulk is portrayed by Mark Ruffalo, where now he turns into the Hulk and he's intelligent and he's, you know, mild-mannered and that whole thing. You know, what are your feelings about the Hulk that you've seen in the movies?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. The whole smart Hulk thing, it almost defeats the purpose because it is just Jekyll and Hyde, right? Like, that's the dynamic of the character, and that just slaps that in the face.
Right.
But I generally liked Mark Ruffalo until that point.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a good gauge because he's always been a supporting character. He's never been the focus.
True. Well, and that's the thing is that, for example, we reviewed the Spider-Man TV show a few weeks back, and they showed his origin, but the one thing they left out was that Uncle Ben gets murdered, and Peter Parker's responsible. And that's the key thing that makes Spider-Man's origin different from Superman's or Batman's, right? He's directly responsible for a large part of his own origin that makes him become a superhero, right?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the spider thing.
Well, yeah, but that's what I mean, is all superheroes have an external event that happens that gives them powers or motivates them, but he was temporarily a selfish, basically like not a rock star, but, he was just making money off of his powers, but because of his own actions, that changed the direction of his life and made him become Spider-Man, whereas no other superhero really has that tragic element to their backstory. with the Marvel superheroes, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko tried to give their characters a little bit more depth to their backgrounds. Like if you look at, you've seen most of the Marvel movies, like, Doctor Strange is a doctor, but he loses the use of his hands, so then he tries to cure that, and then he learns magic. There's a little bit of like an extra dimension to his origin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to think, like, for example, the Fantastic Four, yes, they get powers, but Ben Grimm turns into the Thing, who's a monster, who's ugly, and he's stuck like that, and he hates it, and it's not any fun for him. Everyone else is having fun. So there's always a little element of tragedy. And with the Hulk has a convoluted origin, and I'll just tell you quickly that in the first issue of the Hulk comic, when he was introduced, first of all, he was gray. I'm not sure if you knew that.
No, I thought the Grey Hulk was a character they introduced later, honestly.
No, what happened was, in the first issue, he was gray, and he was intelligent. He was basically just like an asshole, right? Kind of like Mr. Hyde, right?
So he was an alternate personality still, though.
Yes, he was an alternate personality. Yeah, he was just an asshole. And then what happened was, with the second issue, they decided comic book printing at the time was so primitive that they couldn't get the gray tone, consistent in every panel. So they said, screw it, we'll just make him green. So they made him green. Now, also, when Bruce Banner turned into the Hulk originally, what happened was Bruce Banner was testing a gamma bomb, and while all these scientists and the military were getting ready to test this bomb, a group of teenagers, I'm not sure if it was Rick Jones by himself or what happened, but a teenager named Rick Jones decided to park his Jeep in the blast zone of this gamma bomb and just hang out, and was like playing his harmonica and playing his guitar. And Bruce Banner saw the teenager from like the bunker and ran out to save him. But I guess and again, this is from memory, but I believe that there was a scientist there that prevented them from stopping the countdown. And you find out later that that scientist was a Russian spy. And so Bruce Banner runs out. They detonate the bomb, and the bomb goes off, and Bruce Banner gets bombarded with all this gamma radiation, right? Yeah. And then basically from that point forward, for the next few weeks or whatever, every time the night falls, he turns into the Hulk. So he's like a werewolf almost, right? And then after only 6 issues, the Hulk was canceled. It was one of Marvel's first failures. It was canceled. Then they brought him back as a member of the Avengers, but he only lasted 2 issues. Then they gave him his own solo series. I believe it was in Tales to Astonish. I could be wrong about that. And after a while, he took over the book, and then he sort of, over time, morphed into the Hulk that became more popular, which was the dumb Hulk that talked in the third person. Hulk smash, Hulk hate humans, Hulk whatever.
He's got his catchphrases, yeah.
Yeah, right. So it was kind of a gradual thing. But then what happened was, in the 1980s, a writer named Al Milgrom, I believe it was him, who got the idea to bring back the Grey Hulk. And what they did was, at this, over the years, the Hulk was different. Sometimes he's smart, sometimes he's dumb, sometimes Hulk and Banner are separate. So they did a story where they tried to restore the Hulk to the way he was, or the cure the Hulk or something, I don't remember. And they stuck him in a vat of chemicals, and when he came out, he was gray and intelligent. And the idea was, oh, look, it's the original Hulk back. Because what they had done up until that point was, whenever they reprinted Hulk #1, they would just recolor the Grey Hulk as green to make it consistent, right? Mm-hmm. And they would just always say, oh, it was a printing error. He was always meant to be green. But then with this story, and this is something Marvel does that DC doesn't do. DC just reboots things every few years. Marvel tries to acknowledge all these little tiny continuity contradictions, right? And turn them into stories, which is kind of cool.
Kind of insane, too.
Kind of insane. Yes, definitely. No, and also keep in mind that the guys who were writing for Marvel in the 80s were the guys who wrote comics in the 50s and 60s were professional, failed novelists or screenwriters who just worked in comics because they couldn't get work anywhere else. But they were professional writers. The guys who wrote comics in the 70s and 80s were comic book fans, right? That just broke into the industry and they wrote comic books because they grew up on them. So it was a different type of writer. And so, yeah, you have people obsessed with these old stories and this old continuity. And so, in the case of the Hulk, like I said, they brought back the Grey Hulk, and then it went from there. And so the Hulk was intelligent for a few years, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years. And then they did another experiment, then there was a story where the Green Hulk came back, and like in Bruce Banner. Then they did something else where they merged the three together, and it became the Green Intelligent Hulk that lasted for like, I don't know, years, like 10 years. And that's kind of the Hulk that they're doing in the movies now, right? But that's actually, again, like I said earlier, I find that Hulk boring. There's really nothing to it to me, so I just don't enjoy those stories. But let's now jump to what we're talking about today, which is this TV show. So to give a quick backstory, and then as we've seen on this podcast with Taped Crusaders, Marvel was just starting to expand into TV at this time. They just launched the Amazing Spider-Man series of movies, which turned into a TV show. This was the Hulk. Very soon after this, they did a Doctor Strange movie. They did a Captain America. They did 2 TV movies, right? And so they were also expanding into animation with a Spider-Man cartoon, a Spider-Woman cartoon, a Hulk cartoon. So they were really starting to cross over into other media at this time. So Kenneth Johnson, who had created The Bionic Woman, which was a spin-off of $6 Million Man, this was a project that kind of was presented to him, and he had no interest in doing it originally. And again, I'm going from memory, so I might get a couple of these facts wrong, but he basically kind of went home and thought it over, and he thought of a different way to spin the character. And I just explained what the comic book origin was. Well, Kenneth Johnson came up with the idea that Bruce Banner was actually someone who felt weak, physically weak, and because his physical weakness had resulted in the death of a loved one, which we see in this movie. And we'll get into that exact plot later, but I personally think that the elements that Kenneth Johnson added to the origin make the Hulk a much more interesting character than the comic book version. And so this is kind of the Hulk that I've always felt the comic book should try to stick closer to, and sometimes they do. Like once in a while, a writer will come along and they'll kind of just do the TV show Hulk. Like there's a writer named Bruce Jones, of all people, who in the mid-2000s started a new run on the Hulk, and the first volume is called Return of the Monster, and it's basically the TV show version of the Hulk, basically, But
interesting.
Yeah, so people do say that this TV show version of the Hulk is basically The Fugitive, because like the Harrison Ford movie.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
I'm sure you're aware that was a TV show in the '60s, right?
Yeah, I think I knew that. But
yeah,
it's one of those things. Now you mention it, yeah, I think I knew that.
Right. Yeah. So the premise of The Fugitive is something that was used also in the TV show Kung Fu, and it's just the idea of like a nomad traveling from town to town, and in every episode they kind of get mixed up with a new group of characters, right? And and have like a new adventure, and by the end of the episode, because of circumstances, they have to leave that town and move on to the next one. In The Fugitive, it was because he was on the run from the one-armed man or whatever it was, and he was also wanted for murder. And in the Hulk, as you find out if you go on to watch the series, Bruce Banner is on the run because of things that happen in this episode, which we won't spoil yet. But that's basically what the premise of the Hulk TV show was. And it did last, I think it was 5 years. So it was obviously a big hit. Spider-Man only lasted 13 episodes. So this was much more successful. Doctor Strange only had 1 movie. Captain America only had 2. So at this point in Marvel's history, the Hulk became their second most popular character after Spider-Man, right? So, yeah. So I know that I've been talking mostly this time, but usually we trade off on who gets to summarize the plots of these episodes. And we did not talk about this before we started recording, but are you comfortable with summarizing the plot of this episode in 2 minutes, we'll say?
Well, by episode you mean, I think it's probably like 3 episodes to make a movie.
Yeah, it was actually... Technically, it was not episodes. It was a TV movie. Yes, this was the pilot movie, we'll call it.
You could almost tell, though, where the episodes would have broken up when you were watching it. At least that's the impression I got. But yeah, I think I can summarize this pretty... Let's see. So, well, there's going to be a lot of questions along the way, though.
Go ahead,
Like,
that's
chiefly,
fine.
Before we even get started, his name is David Bruce Banner.
Yes.
So maybe you should just explain why he's David before I try to summarize this.
Sure. Well, there used to be a rumor, a long-standing myth in Hollywood that the reason Kenneth Johnson changed his name is because the studio or somebody thought that Bruce sounded too gay.
Oh.
However, yes, the real reason is that Kenneth Johnson did not like alliterations, which is when the two words or the two names in someone's first and last name have the same sound, right? So Clark Kent, Peter Parker, on and on and on.
Like
However,
every superhero ever, yeah.
Every superhero. And part of the reason is because Stan Lee had such a bad memory that he used alliteration so he could remember the names better, right?
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And it's funny, though, because in the early issues of the Hulk, I believe his name was Robert Banner, and then later he changed it to Bruce or vice versa. I'm not sure. However, some superheroes were actually created by Stan Lee's brother, Larry Lieber, and those ones do not have alliterative names, and that would be Tony Stark, Donald Blake, probably Henry Pym, and a few other ones. But the ones Stan Lee created were all alliterations. Now, it took 30 years or so, but an interviewer, got the chance to interview Kenneth Johnson, and when they asked him about this question, he gave the story about alliterations. And the guy interviewing him said, "Really? What about Bill Bixby? That's a real name, and that doesn't sound like a comic book name." And he's like, "Damn, you got me. I never thought of that." So anyway, that's the reason why he's called David Banner in this.
Yeah, okay, so I might instinctively call him Bruce throughout this podcast. That's just because I'm used to that.
Sure.
So basically what happens in this story is Bruce Banner, or David Bruce Banner, see, I've already done it, is we see a nice little montage of him with his I guess, love interest. I don't know if I think they're married.
No, they're definitely not. They're just
no.
Oh, sorry. You mean the one in the flashback?
Yeah, I'm starting at the beginning of this.
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't know if they mention if they're married or not. I don't know, but yeah,
they're definitely
lovers.
entangled in a deep romantic way. We see their life basically together.
Yes.
Until there's a horrible car accident, and the car rolls off the road, flips. David Banner is unable to free her from the wreck, and she dies. And these nightmares haunt him. Possibly, and again, I'm not sure if it's ever made clear, but they haunt him to the point of basically directing the course of his research.
I think so, yeah.
Him and Elena, Dr. Elena Marks, I have the the Wikipedia open just so I could remember her name.
Good.
Are working together to basically, they're trying to find out why in situations of extreme panic or stress, people are able to basically possess superhuman abilities, like a mother saving her child can lift a car. And Bruce in particular, David in particular, is interested in this because he was unable to save, I think it's Laura, now I'm looking. Anyway, he was unable to save his lover. So they're interviewing different people, and he finds out that one of the common threads is basically, was it solar flares, like gamma radiation from the sun? And on certain days, it was stronger. And these days all corresponded with all the people they interview who've had these experiences. And he realized that the day he had his experience, the levels were low. So he subjects himself to gamma radiation, but through a lab mishap, someone not labeling the dial on a machine properly, he gives himself far too much.
Yes.
And basically the rest of it is him and Dr. Elena kind of working together to discover what happened. At first it's kind of he loses time. He doesn't know what happened. Then they start hearing about this monster, and they kind of put together that he is this creature, and they're trying to find out what makes it happen. It's very interesting, but it's also kind of like a situation where if you were familiar with the concept already, even through osmosis like me, or had you seen it before, it might be kind of tedious because they spend a long time getting to the answers we kind of already know.
Yes.
It's interesting enough the first time, but it's there wasn't a mystery for me because I already know he gets angry, right?
Right.
I don't know how far you should go with the summaries. That's the gist of it. Obviously, there's more to it. Well, it's not too much more, right?
Well, basically, to add one more thing, I'll just say that throughout the episode, there's a character named Jack McGee who is constantly badgering David Banner about, I don't remember what it's originally about,
He
because it's
wants an
originally
interview. I think they kind of tease the fact that he kind of deals with very like outlandish and like kind of crazy stories, I guess. So they don't really
right.
want to be lumped in with the rest of the crazies.
Yeah, like not like UFOs and Bigfoot and stuff
Yeah.
like that, right? And I don't remember, but he's bugging them about something else, and I don't remember what. But they basically keep brushing him off, and then what happens is he returns while they're in the middle of these experiments, and Bruce Banner or David Banner ends up locking himself in kind of like, I think it's an underwater pressure chamber, but it's inside this
Yeah.
laboratory, and so he locks himself in there for like hours, and they're trying to duplicate. Okay, well, let's duplicate the conditions that I was in when this transformation happened. So we'll make it dark, we'll make it rain, we'll duplicate an electrical storm, but then nothing can make him change. Then he goes to, this is a great scene. He goes to sleep, and the woman is monitoring his brainwave activity, and it starts to go crazy because he starts to dream about his car accident again, and she realizes, oh, he must be dreaming. Then all of a sudden, she's looking down at the whatever it's called, the EKG, and then all of a sudden it stops. And she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, something must be wrong." And she walks towards the camera, and just at that moment, the fist of the Hulk smashes through the glass, and that's how we know he's transformed. And it was
The
triggered by
6-inch glass that nothing's supposed to be able to get through.
Yes, it's so
Yeah.
great. So then the Hulk busts out, and then we were worried that maybe he's going to harm this girl, but no, she ends up calming him down, getting a blood sample. He turns back into Bruce Banner. Then I think they're waiting. They go back to the other lab. They do some research. They come back, and then that's when. Oh no, sorry, no. Jack McKee came before that. They brush him off.
Yeah, he's spying on them, but once
Right.
they leave after that experiment,
Yes.
he kind of gets in. So he's inside when they return.
Yes,
in the
yes.
closet, actually.
Yep. He's hiding in the closet, and they have this conversation, and he overhears some details, like they say, like, "Oh, what if our friend returns?" or something like that. So they never let on that they're the same person. So at this point, Jack McGee still thinks that they know something about the Hulk, but there's no physical connection, right? They don't know that he is the Hulk. So they're kind of they're trying to get him out of the building, and so David Banner brings him upstairs, but what they don't realize is that Jack McGee, when he was in the closet, he had accidentally knocked over like a beaker or whatever it's called, like a
jug.
A jug of chemicals, and it's interacting with something else in there, and it explodes. And it's actually happening just as David Banner is trying to get this guy out of the building, and this is when he gives the famous line. He says, "Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry."
Yeah.
And then just a few moments later is when everything explodes, and then David Banner's trying to figure out how to get back into the building. And then as he's pounding on the window because he sees his coworker trapped under some wreckage, he turns into the Hulk again, goes in, gets her out. I believe Jack McGee sees the Hulk leave. The Hulk runs into the forest with the girl. And then she wakes up with just enough time to tell him that she always loved David, blah, blah, blah. Then she dies, sadly. Then we see the funeral later on, but it's also the funeral of David Banner. So now everyone thinks David Banner's dead. Then we see David Banner kind of looking at the gravestone. He's all sad. And then he walks away. And then we get the first instance of the use of the Lonely Man theme, which is used at the end of every episode of the Hulk.
Oh, okay.
And that's the end. Yep.
There's also, I guess, a nice bit of like bookending in a way that, like, now even with the powers of the Hulk, he still couldn't save his love interest, right?
Yes.
That's interesting thematically, I would say.
Very interesting, considering a similar idea was used just a year later in the Superman film, right? Superman could not save his father, Pa Kent, from the heart attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and you're right. It's like he did all that work, and then he succeeded in becoming strong, but he still couldn't save her. So,
well, it's a little different, too, because it's like the same situation happening twice. Once as a man, once as the monster, and both times he fails.
Ah, good point. Yeah, good point. So, without going any further, I'll just say quickly that I grew up on the Hulk. I was alive when it was on live, when it was on TV. I remember being canceled. I remember being disappointed when it was canceled. I didn't understand why it was canceled. And then years later, I think it was when DVDs were like invented. I mean, one of the first things I got was this Hulk pilot on DVD, and myself and my brother and my cousins all watched it again. We used to play the Hulk as a kid, where we would set up situations where we would just David Banner would, get captured by some bad guys. They'd lock him up. One of us would be the Hulk. We'd turn into the Hulk and we'd beat everyone else up and then run away. And then we just repeated that, right? And everyone
just like
else,
a show.
Yeah, exactly. And then everyone else got to take turns being the Hulk. It was great. So anyway, so then me and my brother started rewatching the series. And it's not a masterpiece, and not every episode is great, but some episodes are as good as this pilot. And I think we've gotten to about a season and a half in about 10 years. So, but it's still good. It's solid. And let me just say, there are definitely some really good episodes that I'm looking forward to seeing. I don't want to, you'll probably never, there's like 80 episodes, you probably never watch it. But there is an episode, for example, where David Banner runs into, I think it's an old man who turns into another Hulk, except he's tall and skinny.
Oh.
And sometimes when you watch a show that you saw as a kid, there's always that one episode you're like, oh, I can't wait to get to that one. I still haven't gotten to it yet, and I refuse to read on IMDb which episode it is. I just want to be completely surprised by it when I get to it,
And then be let down shortly after.
Yeah, probably. But
I think I did see, I'm pretty sure at one point you actually made me watch the Dome episode. I have a memory of that.
The which episode?
Someone drops a big dome on the Hulk.
A dome?
Yeah, am I making that up? I think it happens. They try to capture him, and it's this giant it's a dome. I don't know what else to call it.
Maybe I showed you one scene, because I just don't imagine. If I would have shown you an episode, it would have been pilot. So maybe I just showed you one scene.
Well, I might actually have. I don't know if it's your DVD, but I have this on DVD.
Oh yeah, that's because I gave it to you to watch, and in 10 years you haven't watched it, right?
Hey,
Until
here
now?
we are.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So anyway, I'll just say that I've seen this episode many, many times, and I should also point out that Kenneth Johnson is also the creator of V.
Yes. When his name popped up, I'm like, that's very familiar, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, that explains a lot about the quality of this. Because V's really good. Yes, it is.
So yes, I do think he's a great writer, and while I do agree there are some flaws in this episode, like you pointed out. At some point, it becomes tedious to the point that you wonder, okay, maybe he only had enough for 1 hour, but he had to stretch it out to 2 hours, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, when he's doing the research near the beginning of the episode, when he's researching and they're interviewing people that have had experiences where they've been able to use adrenaline, right, to gain super strength. The first woman was really dramatic. And then the second guy was kind of filler. And then the third one was kind of interesting. But really, they just needed that first woman, right?
Actually, I'll tell you, I was really invested in that part of it.
Okay.
That's the part that surprised me. Because when I started watching, I had expectations, right? It's okay, it's going to be cheesy and fun. But I was actually kind of surprised by just kind of the dramatic angle to it, I guess. And the kind of I don't know if you call it pseudoscience. It's pseudoscience. That, what's his face? Yeah. Jack McGee's got the right idea interviewing these guys. But, yeah, I liked that, seeing the different perspectives on that. And then, the scene when he's kind of losing it, when she's talking about how, she saved her son. That's really good drama. And then, to their credit, they don't really shy away from the anger issue.
Right.
I know somebody in real life who has kind of anger issues, and I was reminded of that. This guy is kind of unpleasant and kind of scary when he gets angry, even without the Hulk.
Right. Good point.
So,
well, yeah. So again, that kind of brings up there's a slightly tragic angle to this character, which I've always loved. And, you mentioned Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of, in appearance at least, there's a little bit of Frankenstein, even in this episode, right?
That the first Hulk scene is Frankenstein until it becomes ridiculous.
Right, yes, it does become ridiculous. But But the thing is, yeah, so like I said, there is some padding in the episode. Also, when they're doing the research and they're analyzing the research and they're trying to figure out what it is, it's like you said, we know that it's anger. We know what the trigger is. So it becomes a little bit tedious when you can see them kind of like wasting time, kind of padding the episode. But other than
that's where you get like a nice montage. You can kind of skim over them trying things quickly, a couple things.
Right.
Like, you don't have to come up too quick, right? It's stupid. But it's like, yeah, you don't have to watch every step of the way as they rule out every possible option.
Right, exactly. So I guess I got to say that other than that padding, and other than a few moments, like maybe, throwing the father through the air and a couple things like that, I love this pilot. Like, and in fact, my brother is not really a comic book reader, but he loves the show and we watch it still to this day, I think the writing is good. I think the acting is good. I think Bill Bixby is a great lead.
He's awesome, yeah.
Yeah, he's just great. And also I like the fact that he's kind of average looking and he's small stature, which makes it even more of a contrast with Lou Ferrigno, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I don't know if you know this, but a quick side note. Lou Ferrigno is famous because he was in the movie Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's kind of what made him famous. I'm not sure if you knew that.
No.
Yeah, and so it was like a famous documentary in the 70s, and it made them both kind of stars. Obviously, Arnold Schwarzenegger went on to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Lou Ferrigno was not ever nearly as popular. However, what I didn't realize was that if you see them standing next to each other, Lou Ferrigno makes Arnold Schwarzenegger look like me, basically. Like, I'll send you a picture of him. You will not believe how big this guy is. I'll send it to you right now.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah. Like,
you can eat him.
Not only is he, like, several inches taller, he's, like, wider, bigger, everything. Like, he looks like a giant. And he's the perfect actor to play the Hulk, right?
Yeah,
and
before I saw this picture, I was going to say, well, I don't know if Schwarzenegger is the tallest guy around, but you're right. It's not just height. It's also just, like, girth. Like, unless there's, like, some forced perspective going on here.
Right. Good
It's like
point.
The Hobbit or something.
Right. So the thing is, hold on a sec here. I'm just going to make a note. So the thing is, like, I have a roommate, and he walked by when I was watching this episode, and he kind of scoffed at it like, phew, nice CGI. And I'm thinking, no, that's the point. You don't need CGI when you have Lou Ferrigno, right? Like, I personally I've always said this before. You can admire CGI, but you cannot be frightened by it. I personally think Lou Ferrigno in makeup is scarier than the CGI Mark Ruffalo in the Avengers movies. What do you think?
If scary is the word, yeah, I guess. I'm not going to defend Lou Ferrigno that strongly, just because, one, the eyebrows do him a disservice, I think.
Okay.
And then I'd say the staging of a lot of the scenes, because what I would say is most of this does not look low budget, made for TV. Most of it looks really good, just like V, right? But the scenes with the Hulk himself are the ones where you notice. It goes from being kind of serious to kind of camp really fast. And I don't think it's Lou Ferrigno's fault. I just think it's like the way the scenes are set up. The only one that works really good is, like you said, the high pressure chamber scene. I thought was really effective until she makes him sit on a leather sofa. Then that's kind of goofy.
Okay, I'll give you that.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if scary is the word I'd use. Like, I guess when he's in the rain, it's kind of scary.
Well, okay, like, yeah, I'll give you that. Like, when it's in the rain and it's well lit, obviously that's more scary than a brightly lit daylight shot of him. That's the thing. If you have a practical effect, you still have to shoot it the right way, right? Yeah.
Because also, actually, like a modern example is the newest Jurassic World film. It's like, we brought back all the animatronics from the first film, but they don't shoot them well, so they don't look real at all. They might as well use the CG at that point.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
okay. I'll give you that.
I mean, again, it's not consistently bad. But it's mainly that one scene with the father and the daughter that, like, really got hokey.
Sure. Well, I guess the other thing is in the comics, the Hulk is unimaginably strong. Like, he can lift 100 tons and hold up a mountain and all this stuff. I've always liked in the TV show how he's obviously super strong, But, if he's going to knock over a tree, he still has to struggle, right? If he's going to lift up a car, he still has to struggle.
He got shot, too.
Yeah, he got shot and he got injured. Now, he healed quickly, which they later adopt into the comics as a way to explain, actually, how he resists injury. But, I love superheroes, but I do like there to be a little bit more of a grounding in their superpowers. Like, I know that you haven't read many comics, but what do you find more interesting? Like a Hulk that, has to struggle to lift a car, or a Hulk that can just, throw a mountain?
I think a lot of people agree with it's like the Batman thing, right? People love Batman because they, aside from being rich, they could be him, right? But then something like Superman or Wonder Woman, it's kind of harder to see, like, what are their limitations. It's hard to have stakes. You have to almost, like with Superman, you have to set up situations where he has to rescue people. That's the stakes. It's not, is he going to lose, like be defeated, right?
Right.
Unless they give him even more powerful enemies, and that becomes tedious after a while, too. There's always even stronger than the last guy. So, yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. I like the street level stuff better, like where it's more like... And like you said, a more vulnerable Hulk is a good idea. It's just funny that Hulk's first nemesis is an old hunter, basically, in the forest. Right. Good point. And now, here's the thing is, I should also point out, in this TV show, there are 0 supervillains. Like in the comics, you have the Abomination, you have the Leader, you have whoever. But in the TV show, it's just, crooks and gangsters and whoever. But because it has decent writing, they always manage to find a way that, there's still conflict. He's always got to save some girl or help some family or do whatever. And I think, again, I mean, is it because the comic book version is too childish? I don't know, because I watched this TV show when I was a kid and I loved it. So I just think that at the end of the day, this version of the Hulk is just better, for me at least. So yeah, I guess, okay, so we've already talked about Lou Ferrigno. You've mentioned Bill Bixby, so you weren't a fan of his acting then? Yeah, I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but I liked him in this. Yeah. I mean, like I said, like they allowed him, or he just decided to add a little more edge to his character, which is uncommon, I would say, at that time period, to see someone that, like I said, he's kind of scary when he's angry, like even before the Hulk. That's a good point. Like, you're right. He has like an undercurrent of a bad temper that, and even yeah, like you could see him, like sometimes he'll like slam down his books, or he'll snap or whatever, right? Or like Elena is like trying to like reel him in, or say like set your expectations more realistically, and you can tell he doesn't want to hear it. Like he's close to just like, I don't think he's gonna hit her. I mean, she seems convinced he wouldn't hurt anybody. I'm not as convinced as her. Right. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. And you know what? I think that's the key, the main reason Eric Bana was a terrible Bruce Banner. And honestly, I don't think Mark Ruffalo is a good Bruce Banner. Eric Bana has no emotion, and Mark Ruffalo is just too laid back and too cool. Ed Norton is a great actor, but he didn't really play this up. But I think the key to Bruce Banner is he has to always seem like he's constantly on edge and trying to hold back this anger. That's what makes him interesting, right? Because with Mark Ruffalo, I think because he showed up in the first Avengers movie, and by the end they made a joke about how, oh, I'm always angry. Okay, let's just defeat the entire purpose of his character in one line. Exactly. Undercut the whole point of his character. You're 100% right. Yeah. So, wow. I mean, it was funny at the time, but I didn't think, like, now I've seen this, it's like, oh, wow. Oh. I know. I agree. So yeah, he's a great actor. Obviously, he starred as the Hulk the whole way through and carried it through. I should also point out, after the show was canceled about 8 years later or 6 years later, there was 3 Hulk TV movies. Are you aware of these? Yes, I saw that 2 of them are currently streaming on Tubi, and one of them was directed by Bill Bixby. That's right. So have you seen those yet? No, I mean, I just watched this. I probably will actually. I'll tell you this. I like this enough that I probably will watch at least one of those to see how it holds up. Yeah, interesting. If you're, and I also happen to have access to the box set of the DVDs, all the seasons. Well, so if you're ever realistically, if you, the super fan, have spent years getting through one season, what are the odds? Okay, I'll give you that. I still got the Community box set that you gave me that I haven't even started yet, so we're on even ground for that. But anyway, okay, now you want to talk about bad guys, about heavies. What did you think of Jack Colvin as Jack McGee? He's I liked him well enough, but he's almost like a non-presence, honestly. He kind of just pops in here and there. Like, he didn't get a chance to be super sinister.
Okay. Well, he's not supposed to be sinister. He's supposed to be annoying. Like
But
annoying.
even then, they brush him off so easily, right?
Well, let's put it this way then. I think you need to watch more episodes because I think he's absolutely amazing in this role. Like even as a kid, like, and that's the thing. Yeah, he's not like a supervillain. The whole idea is that he represents what like Bruce Banner or David Banner's biggest fear is exposing the truth. And
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? You can't punch him. You can't kill him. He's a reporter. What are you gonna do, right? You just have to keep running from him. And so he's not in every episode of the show, but every few episodes. Because what happens in the premise of the show is that David Banner is kind of just on the run. And so the episode will start off where he'll walk into a town, he'll get a job as, like a custodian, or or the episode will open up, he'll already be working like at a, I don't know, unloading boxes somewhere. And then every once in a while, Jack McGee will show up and he'll either see him or he'll kind of just be snooping around, and he'll just be a constant nuisance throughout the show.
In case you're curious, I got Wikipedia open. 56 out of 82 episodes.
Wow. Okay.
He's pretty persistent.
Yeah, even more than I thought. Okay. Interesting. So yeah. So anyway, as someone who's seen a lot of the episodes, I think he was great. Like just really good. So I encourage you.
Just in the context of this one story, like, again, he never finds out the truth. He gets basically tricked every step of the way, right? Like
Right.
Not tricked necessarily, just like they lose him pretty easily.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Now I don't have. I'm trying to find the name of the woman who played the woman in this episode. But
yeah,
I can't
Elena
find her.
is Susan Sullivan.
Okay, I thought she was actually a really good actress.
Yeah, I liked her.
Yeah, I thought she was great. I mean, what else is there to say? She's a great actress. She's obviously good looking. I liked her character too. Like I like the fact. First of all, one thing I love about most of Marvel's superheroes is they're all scientists. Most of them. Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Hank Pym, Reed Richards, right? They're all scientists in a specific field. And I like the fact that we get to see Bruce or David Banner working at this wherever he works. And he's a scientist, she's a scientist. And they almost, I don't want to say Mulder Scully, but they have this, they have a professional relationship. They work together, but they never share their feelings.
With a little bit of the will they, won't they underneath. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, like she makes a strong impression right off the bat. She's just kind of like light and funny right off the bat. Even as she's talking to her non David Banner coworkers.
Right.
Actually, a little bit of a side note though. Is that donut scene supposed to be ridiculous on purpose? Where he goes off to get like some food and he comes back with one donut?
Yeah, it's you know what? Okay, I was thinking about that because again, I'm gonna forgive. It's a weekly TV show. It's network TV. It's a different standard, and I thought about it, and I think I realized the reason that Kenneth Johnson took the time to put that in there. Have you ever read that book on screenwriting? It's called Save the Cat.
No.
Okay, so it's a book about screenwriting tips, but one of the things they say is that in a story or screenplay, you have to have a scene where the lead character does something nice for someone, and it's to show that they're a good person. So, for example, whatever, it's like the literal example is you show the hero of the story saving a cat. So now you know that they're a good person, right? So in this scene, yeah, but you get the premise though, right? Like you have a character. How am I going to show that he's good? Oh, I'll show him helping an old lady across the street.
If not good, I guess you try to make them likable, right?
Yeah, likable. There you go. Or have rooting interest or whatever, likable. Mm-hmm. So in this one, I see it as there's only one donut left. He brings it back. He gives half to the kid, and then I believe after the kid and the mother walk out, doesn't he split it up and give it to the girl?
Yeah, they share the donut. I thought.
Sure.
I mean, it's a weird thing to to obsess over. It's just a mild plot point. It's just funny how they focused on it.
Yeah, I totally know what you're saying, but you're right. It's just because they focus so much time on it, you kind of have to go, well, why the hell did they? And I think that's why. It's just like they maybe it was like a draft 2, and they go, okay, well, I got to put something in here to make Bruce Banner more likable because maybe in these other scenes his bad temper is making him seem like too much of an asshole. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
I just find it funny they couldn't give him like a box of donuts, that he just comes back with one. It's not even in a
Sure,
wrapper. He's just holding his one donut.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I don't know. I just think that maybe they purposely did that so that he would have to share it, so that therefore it would make him look good, you know?
I guess.
Yeah, that's what I think, but who knows?
You're probably right. You know, honestly, it's just crazy enough. It's probably right.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, so yeah, those are pretty much the main actors for the show. There's not really many other characters in it. I guess, so we've talked about the special effects. What about the music? Were you a fan of the theme?
I don't have a ton of I suck with music. Like, honestly, if you told me what, like, you're asking me about the music, I don't remember any of it.
Okay. And here's the thing: I'm not a huge music guy either, but I do really like the music in this. And again, it's just like the main theme is just on a piano, but it's actually really sad, right? Like and again, I was a little kid in the 70s, but one of the things about 70s film and TV was it was definitely grimier and grittier than 80s films. I think you'd agree with that, right?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, and even the Spider-Man TV show, which was terribly written, one of the things I liked about it is that it still looked grimy, right? And when they were on a set, it looked down to earth. And I think one of the mistakes that too many superhero movies make is that you have these characters that are already superpowered. So on top of that, we don't need them to work like in a super technological, office or a super whatever this. Like, to me, the more down to earth and the more mundane the settings are, it makes the character stand out more. Unless it's like Batman or something. But
well,
I think
that's an interesting point, because one of my favorite films, the recent Godzilla 2014, the director, actually it's 10 years old now, so not recent, but the director said you get one outlandish element, everything else should be grounded to make that seem more impressive by comparison, right?
Exactly.
So he had Godzilla, so the military response, the way he's shot, the way the world is, everything has to be consistent with that. Like, it doesn't have, there's obviously different ways to do this kind of story, right? That's the way he picked. And by doing it that way, yeah, the otherworldly aspects just seem that much more impressive.
I agree. And if I want to take it one step further, with just two superhero examples, one of the things I like about the Superman films is, Richard Donner purposely tried to make it as realistic as possible, but I like the fact that it's just New York, right? Like, even though it says Metropolis, it's New York, and the cops are like New York cops.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in some versions of the comic books, like in the 80s and 90s, they tried to go, oh, well, the Metropolis police have to deal with supervillains, so therefore they should have laser cannons and armor and special vehicles. And again, now it takes you out of the real world, right? So
and
now
it's tough to tell certain kinds of stories. I just watched the first episode of Miss Marvel, and it's a cute little, like, grounded high school drama kind of thing, right?
Right.
But it's against the backdrop of, like, alien races and multiverses and this and that, and it's a little hard to invest in this little story as a result, at least I find.
Well, I'm actually a big fan of that TV show.
Well, no, it's really good. I'm just saying it sucks that it has to be, like, saddled with so much, like, exterior lore that it can't just be a regular girl, even if they want to write it that way, right?
Yeah, you know what? That's a separate conversation, but I see what you're getting at. But I guess what I definitely agree with your comment about Godzilla, and I think you can apply it to most superhero stories. And even just with another superhero example with Spider-Man, one of the things about Spider-Man is that he's supposed to just be a regular kid in high school, right, with an aunt and an uncle, and then the uncle dies, blah blah blah. The biggest blunder Stan Lee ever made was he did a comic where he explained where Spider-Man's parents are. Like, who are Spider-Man's parents? And I don't know if you're familiar with the story.
That's from Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Spies, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's crap.
That just totally ruins it, right? But
yeah.
And then they kind of forgot about that story for like 10 to 15 years. Then they brought it back, and it's just dump it. Just forget it. Rewrite it. Like, it just ruins the character. The whole point is, like you said, you have to be able to imagine yourself as that character, right? And the more you add to his backstory, the less relatable the character becomes to you, right? So
Well, I mean, the Hulk, man, his origin, I mean, aside from like the sciencey stuff, like his first time becoming the Hulk is fixing a flat tire in the rain, and who can't relate to that, right? Like that's the frustration is real.
Yep, exactly. That's a great point. That's a really good point. Speaking of relating to things, it's funny because on our other podcast we did the Flash. Now the Barry Allen Flash. This is kind of a famous origin. Barry Allen is staying late at work one night, and there's a thunderstorm, and the thunder, like one of the bolts of lightning, hits his lab and ignites certain chemicals that are there, and that gives him the power of the Flash, right? Like, I'm not sure if you've heard that origin before.
No, that sounds pretty stock.
Yeah, it's pretty stock, right? Like, that's how most superheroes get their powers. There's some kind of weird accident, they get dropped into a vat of chemicals, something happens. The original Jay Garrick Flash from the 1940s is a university student, and I think he's in a lab or he's maybe working on homework, and he decides that because he's been working so long, it's time to take a smoke break. And so he lights up a cigarette, which is so unusual for a superhero to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so something happens with, I don't know if it's the smoke or mixing with the chemicals, but he gets knocked unconscious and he inhales the fumes from hard water, and when he wakes up, he's the Flash. So not nearly as cool as being struck by lightning.
Yeah, you want that big like boom moment to it, yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, so I don't know. I mean, I've
Well, this Hulk here, his origin, if you think about it, is it's set up nicely how they're doing a test early on, and they mention, it can actually go higher than you think it can, this knob, because what's his face has fixed it. And then it turns out he's been fixing a lot of things around the building, and he doesn't always leave a handy reminder. So really, the origin here is it's some guy didn't label a knob properly after tweaking it.
Right. Well, the other thing we should point out is that in the comic book, Bruce Banner designs a gamma bomb that detonates, and he, again, save the cat, he goes out to save the kid who's in the area. But because of that, he bombards himself with gamma radiation. But I like that in this TV show, he's purposely trying to give himself extra strength so that he's if it ever happens again, he's able to help like a loved one if they're ever in danger. But because of this accident, because of this fluke of luck, he ends up overloading himself with gamma radiation, which leads to the creation of the Hulk, which I think is a great little addition to the story.
Well, and I love the grounding with real world phenomena, like whether or not it's real or not. It's like UFOs are accepted as real world to a degree, right? Like this strength people get in these stressful situations. Like that's something everyone's familiar with, that concept, right?
Yes.
So by having them research that's just an interesting angle to take. I would have never thought about that as a way to explain the Hulk.
Exactly. And also, the thing about the sunspots, I like there's a little bit of detective work, right? That he's like, oh, well, maybe it's this. And the fact that he's a scientist and he's able to like print out that graph of the, whatever it is, the sunspot radiation, he's able to mark it down. And, I just love that little bit,
like
right?
We were teasing, but they are doing science. Really, it's less, at least this episode is less of a superhero story and more of just like you said, Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like a science horror almost.
Right. Whew, well, the thing is, like I've said before, this is my favorite version of the Hulk. And that's why, for example, in the 2000s, they kind of, I had mentioned to you that they started doing kind of a TV version of the Hulk for a couple years, but a writer named Bruce Jones. And then a different writer came along and he kind of changed directions. And they did a story called World War Hulk. And then they did Planet Hulk, where the Hulk goes to another planet and becomes a gladiator or something or other. I don't remember. I had no interest in that story at all. And I read it and I didn't like it. And maybe it was well written for what it was. But the premise itself, again, it's like I think it was Alfred Hitchcock that said there's only two kinds of stories. An unextraordinary man in an extraordinary situation, or an extraordinary man in a mundane situation. Although he worded it better. But the point is that, a green-skinned, super strong superhero is already fantastic. You don't need to put him in space in a gladiator fight, right? Like the whole point is that no, keep him in the real world, keep it grounded, and that to me is just much more interesting.
I guess. I mean, I did like Thor Ragnarok, which clearly took that idea.
Yes.
And that was all extraordinary people in extraordinary places. Maybe there's an element of make it comedic then, or work overtime to ground your characters emotionally.
I think that's the thing, is that you can do it. Obviously, it has been done. But yeah, then at that point, you have to either make it, like you said, comedic, or you just have to, it's so different from the original concept. It's not even, again, like Star Wars, they're literally mixing genres, science fiction and fantasy, and they're still somehow making it work, but they're grounding it in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. But it becomes something different at that point. Absolutely.
I guess it has its own internal logic. This is the real world to them.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you'd already said that it's very unlikely that you'll go forward, but you did say that you're interested in watching the Hulk movies possibly, correct?
As long as you don't think I need to see the show to...
No, not really. No.
I didn't think... Older shows usually don't need to.
No, they're definitely standalone episodes, so it's not like there's any continuity. And the only recurring character besides David Banner is Jack McGee, so yeah, you're good.
I know all about him now.
Yep. So there you go, The Incredible Hulk. Like I said, I've only been waiting to show you that for 10 years. So I'm glad we finally got to review for this episode. It's unfortunate we couldn't be joined by Josh and Becca, because Becca was actually with us when we watched that Captain America movie. Remember that?
Oh, the really rubbery guy?
Yes, from 1990s. So that's kind of where I got the idea, maybe we'll watch Hulk, but then we never got around to it until now. So.
This is way better than that.
Oh yeah, this is like a whole other league. Like I said, we just reviewed Spider-Man in the last episode. It was terrible. Like, other than a couple cool little moments, it was pretty terrible compared to this. So it's clear why this one was much more successful. Mm-hmm. So there you go. We want to thank Kyle Ben Dongan for joining me and me alone, because no one else was here this week. But yeah, thank you for coming through and reviewing the Hulk.
No problem.
We'll definitely, I've got you down for a couple episodes in the near future, but I'll keep those as a surprise until they actually come up. But for next week's episode, we are going to be reviewing none other than Spider-Man! And unfortunately, we've already got 2 guests booked, Kyle, so you're going to be missing that one. Sorry.
Oh, you mean like Japanese Spider-Man?
Yes, Spider-Man, yeah. But
I'll have to watch it on my own.
Yeah, sorry. But hey, you know what? You never know. On this podcast, people tend to cancel at the last minute. So as long as you can squeeze in a 20-minute watch of an episode, who knows? You might still be in the episode. We'll let you know.
Cool.
There you go. Okay. So anyway, there you go. Join us next week for Tape Crusaders, and join us, actually before that, join us for Slam. On the next episode of Slam, we are reviewing Hawkman with Adam Pelche, so be sure to join us wherever you can find podcasts. And until next time, see you later.